We are one.
The first half of life was all about passion and achievement and showing up and being somebody.
Great.
We need that. You need to have a self before you can move beyond it. But this dark that we're talking about is the understanding that there are many powerful and beautiful and creative aspects of the self were exiled to fit in, particularly to this culture. This journey to the West is opening the conversation in the loving embrace of community with elders on board to allow some of the parts that got cut off and boxed up to come back. And I think, risky as it is, or that's such an important part of finding out, I think, who we are and what our gift is for the world. You might not find your gift in that first half. Everybody else might be telling you what to do. Interesting. But it's not until that time of being rubbed and forced to look within that you might start to get a feeling for, actually, no. And I think this is what Bill Plotkin's talking about when he talks about the birth of true adulthood.
What I'm aware of is, I'm 80 years old now, and in my lifetime I've seen a gradual and steady rise in industrial growth and treating the earth as something to be used for humankind. And I'm seeing all over the place, particularly politically, environmentally, all over the place, that's utterly sustainable and that huge damage is being done to our earth. And what I'm appreciating about the Bill Plotkin work is that he says that the basic economy is the economy of nature. And unless we're bound into and living in tune enough with the economy of nature, we're done. And what the Industrial Growth Society does, and the concept of endless growth, is blow that apart and assume that we can consume. To me, it's utter folly. And what I'm seeing is that basically now adolescents are in charge of Western democracies, or the States and New Zealand in particular, saying, I want it all and I want it now. No far-sightedness and no connection with life's cycles. What do you think about that?
It's interesting because I think you're rare to be in 80 and speaking that way. I don't meet so many people in that end of the... Bill's work, he speaks to this. He speaks to the fact that he thinks as a society, especially in the West, we've never matured ourselves out of adolescence. So what does that mean? It means that the body grows older, the folds come, the grey hairs, the wrinkles, but it doesn't mean that a person has managed to mature their view. They can still be stuck in a very egotistical, defensive, dominator, hierarchical way of operating. And
what would you come up with if a person was asking that of you, Jamie, a 30-year-old person, 30-year-old person who's dismayed with the state of the world, looking for something more, not knowing quite where to find it or a way, and not having sufficient models of older people to show the way? What would you have to say to a person like that, particularly in the light of the retreat?
It's big. I think it's a big question. I've been thinking about this a lot, and because this work, Bill Plotkin's work, not only that, Joanna Macy, is almost counterculture. It's not what we get in the mainstream. So, am I speaking to a fringe? Am I speaking to a few people who are intuiting that there is another way to live? And I think it must be really challenging to have a part of, can I use the word soul? We could talk about how what that might mean. We certainly know that Bill Plotkin's got a different way of talking about it. But having a part of us that has these intuitions and intimations of wholeness and the way to live, and we could be living in utopia, we could be living, communities could be thriving, all these different things, education, healthcare, the way we work. So there's a part of us that I think has this vision or, as I said, intuition of wholeness, and yet that's at odds with the mainstream culture. And so you said 30-something, 20, 30-something, so how much access do they have, like you said, to a map or inspiration or a mentor or someone who can, I suspect that a lot of people are been bred on media and advertising and consumer culture where going to the mall is an addiction almost there to buy.
And a growing number of people are utterly dismayed by that. They can see through it and saying, I'm not being met by this, my deepest self, my longing to be myself, to express myself freely, to care for the world, to be connected with the beauty that's around me. People with an intuitive sense of that are not being met by the culture that we're in. And certainly I'm not being met by that culture either. So I am alienated from my own culture, the consumption part of it. So I'm looking for something that is not that, and I'm looking for something that is more.
Yeah.
And for me,
are you speaking from what place?
I'm speaking from the place I am right now, age 80.
Yeah.
And the more that I want is to be full of and engaged in where I started as a baby in the East, growing in a sort of innocence and in a connection with things around, a growing connection with this beautiful world, and taking my life and inspiration from the rhythms of the natural world rather than trying to push through that and create something that's kind of dissonant and consumptive, etc. I want to be in tune, if you like, with the mystery, with the dark, the part that knows that things are not as they should be, and there's the shadow self within myself. I want to be in touch with all that and not be derailed by it, but no, this is a total me, and to care for and to resonate with and to be part of the more than human world. That's where my solace is now. And often that's in quietness. I mean, it can be in violence also as part of the natural world, but it's largely these days in silence and quietness and sensing and intuiting and care for the little ones who are coming on. That's right.
I think it's touching because you made reference to this direction, the East, and I don't know if that's going to make any sense to people, but let's locate it a little bit. So this is like a traditional, it's global, but it comes from the model of a medicine wheel where each direction can be related to the time of the day or the time of the seasons or even the stages of life. So you said, it's beautiful to think, because when you talk about innocence, it's not ignorance. So a baby is born with innocence. So at the moment I'm having plenty experience of seeing, gazing with wonderment into this gift of what a child brings. And I'm having encounters with children also in their early, not quite a teenager, but I'm seeing how their imagination is intact and their innocence is intact. It's I just played a gig on the ferry, and this one girl, she was 7 years old, bless her, Sophia, we'll name her, and she was there and she was clapping like this. Yeah. She's not always in time, and all the other people, and her father was looking at her almost to say, all right, that's enough now, come on, like conform, don't make her.
Yes.
But she was so so pure into that innocence.
Yes.
But you're not on about that, but you are on about it, but you've travelled the whole wheel And you mentioned these other things of the dark, and perhaps, hopefully, if you've been paying attention, wisdom, and then arriving back in the East and with your innocence still intact.
Yeah.
That is one of the, well, it's a beautiful thing. I mean, I don't think every person gets to be older and still have glimpses of that innocence available to them, to their creativity. Another thing that I want to touch that when you were speaking about that, I think it's a really valid question to say, you said, and the dark. And that's really a little bit about what this program, what we're trying to do in Rewild is about. I'd love to try and find some words about that. It's the recognition, for me, it was completely veiled up until my 30s. And even then...
The dark was completely veiled.
Absolutely. So, shit things happened. Things, my dad died when I was young. I realised that life had teeth and it was impermanent. And I lost love. So I started to experience this impermanence. But the dark was still veiled. I think it's incredible. I will stand by this, that the life stages are there. And it wasn't until coming into the 40s and the 50s, then suddenly aspects of poetry started to speak to me in a way that I'd never spoken before. And a mythological story came along. And the reason why the mythological story came alive was it was mirroring it was the only thing that could give voice, and it wasn't crystal clear, but it was like a feeling of, that's it. That's what's happening in my life. And that what that is becoming aware that I've been operating from, like the first half of life was all about passion and achievement and showing up and being somebody.
Great.
We need that. You need to have a self before you can move beyond it. But this dark that we're talking about is the understanding that there are many powerful and beautiful and creative aspects of the self were exiled to fit in, particularly to this culture. By my parents, unintentionally. By society. No, you won't be dressing like that. No, you won't be making music. You will not move your body in such wild, fiery ways. And you won't be thinking that way. So, just to wrap that up, this journey to the West is opening the conversation in the loving embrace of community with elders on board to allow some of the parts that got cut off and boxed up to come back. And I think, risky as it is, that's such an important part of finding out, I think, who we are and what our gift is to the world. You might not find your gift in that first half. Everybody else might be telling you what to do. Interesting. But it's not until that time of being rubbed and forced to look within that you might start to get a feeling for, actually, no. And I think this is what Bill Plotkin's talking about when he talks about the birth of true adulthood.
It throws up lots of things to me, like in previous retreats we've had rewilding and reliving or expressing the wild side and the childlike side, etc. And then what we're talking about in the retreat coming up is moving more towards the West, away from childhood and their puberty into authentic adulthood, moving towards that. And one of my passions is to be there around those who are trying to find out who they are and who they're not, and to usher them into to go boldly with their eyes wide open into the dark, and to realise that the early life stages have been preparation for this very egoic, and then the kind of in the cocoon, the refashioning into the adult that we are led to be, not who someone else said we should be, but exploration of self into, I think Plotkin talks about our particular ecological niche that only we can fill. And I have a huge amount of energy in uffing younger people into being eyes wide open about that, and going boldly into the dark, and not being afraid of that, and perhaps actively disapproving of other people who said, don't do this and don't do that. I think the ability to experiment and to make mistakes and to fall over is a really powerful thing, and I have lots of energy for helping people through that necessary process.
Yeah.
I mean, you can retreat from it, so I'm not going to do that, live a conformist life or a rebellious life, if you like, but I think there's better ways of doing that, of moving into the south and into the dark and into a more life-loving, whole of life way of being, which sees the light as well as the dark, and doesn't get too derailed by our foolishness as we grope around.
But the power of it is to do it in community,
Yeah.
I think, where you have the support of
Yeah.
your support. It's not really a peer group, but it's people. I think people, if you hear the call, you'll know it. There's some wonderful lines of poetry that speak to that, but it is, and then those people come together like a sudden community and spend these 5-6 days together, and it's, and just to speak to what you just said, I mean, I think it's so empowering for a younger person to be seen and to be heard, and to be encouraged to follow that. It's almost unnamable, isn't it? It's like a mystery to follow that, and that's what I've seen you do actually in the retreats gone by. It's just like, it takes eldership. That's the important thing in this work of, they call it like kind of counsel and mirroring, and I think it's like almost like dream work. You as a younger person, or you the egoic self, I the egoic self, I can't translate my dreams. It's on the level of that deeper world, the soul. But a well-tuned elder has this potential, or a community. It's its beauty. It's bigger than one person. Has the possibility of seeing a being, watching them move in their light and the dark, seeing their edges and their vulnerability, and then at a key moment being able to reflect back to them this essential next step for their journey and encouragement.
My experience is that if I pay attention to them, they will tell me. What I find really repulsive about the dominant narrative in our society is the cult of individualism. And if you're going to have trouble, go away and get it sorted out yourself, which is okay if you're Buddhist, for example, it's a real power in that, or individual psychotherapy or work or mentoring or going away to an ashram or something like that, all valid stuff. Some of that can be done when we get together as a group, and I use this term afi, which is putting our growing edge out to each other and walking each other home in that process is very powerful, because in that I know that I'm not alone, and I can look at you and I can get teary and know that, we walk each other home. So I'm a very big fan of that, and that's got sometimes very little to do with here, but a lot to do with here, and to do with personal encouragement and the easing of loneliness. Cognition can take us so far, but it's the experience of being loved and loving and linking arms and saying,
Let's go together.
We're travelling together. I'm not alone. In a society in which there's aching loneliness, over and above the existential loneliness, which is a given, but there's too much loneliness and not enough walking each other home. And my experience of the retreats that's been huge. It's been huge for me as an older person, being walked home by those who are younger, and walking those who are young home in ways that are hard to define. And when I think of us now, I think of people who've been on retreat, and there's love and connection and support and gratitude. And beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Your challenge to me, Bill, was in a way was basically, Bill said to me a while ago, he said something like, it's really fringe. Not many people have heard of Bill Plotkin.
No.
And I run the risk of turning him into a god by ranting on about him all the time. And I'm not. I don't want to do that. I mean, I've produced some Animas Valley events in New Zealand. I've met the man. I've hosted him. He's fully human. And I was touched by that humanity and the depth of his insight and his skill as a guide. But I don't want to come across as if this is the answer to everything. I'm not saying that. But if I was to try and say a few words about why is this work speaking to us at this time, or speaking to me, what would I say, and how? Because I came from a place of 15 years learning to meditate, and it wasn't really about meditation to calm myself down, although I did need that. I was quite frightened animal, I think, as a result of the upbringing. But I had a great teacher there, Tarchin Hearn, and what he was really pointing at was into beingness. It's this eco-awakening. I think it's such a profound...
Eco-awakening.
Awakening to this sense, and I get passionate about it, your birthright of belonging. It's not a negotiable. We've been robbed of that, in a way. Bill Plotkin would say that in intact indigenous society, this wouldn't be a question of eco-awakening, because you'd have never fallen asleep.
That's right.
So I think this is our primary work here,
yes.
And I'm interested in helping young people firstly contact it themselves, glimpse it, and then realize that it's not something that you dip in and out of.
No.
This eco-awakening I hesitate to use the word fundamental, but it is the ground of our being.
We're joining the essence of life.
Yeah. And it's so that's one of the things that this work in Animas Valley. I was saying that Tarchin gave me the taste of that, but I found that meditation work was also quite sedentary, sitting down, and my body was, so there was more. And I remember, I'll just share this last little piece as a story. We were really into the Buddha Dharma, and it was very universal, so that was great. I didn't feel like I was a Buddhist. People would say, you're a Buddhist, and I was like, don't feel comfortable with that. But this word Buddha Dharma, this passion for life, and it was all about emptiness. That's what it was. It was as if to say you're empty, and it was as if I was trying to meditate to just disappear. But it was an immature way of seeing it and holding it. And I remember I got to the place where it's like I was just so certain that I had a soul.
Certain that you had a
soul, and it felt at odds in a way. And it was for me to resolve that. And it's taken a decade of rites of passage work, and then coming in contact with Bill's work, and he presented this map of these 8 life stages with these archetypes: innocent in the nest, explorer in the guardian, thespian at the oasis, wanderer in the cocoon, and they go on, and
apprentice at the wellspring.
Yeah, and each life stage has developmental tasks. And if we as a society and community begin to address those developmental tasks, I had a sense in not just my head but in my heart that we would be moving towards community, wholesome living. Not just, people talk about sustainability, but no, what about enhancing life? And all of that would come. Actually, the doorway to all of this is, I think it is that eco-awakening. You first have the confirmation that you are part of the earth, of the living systems. You cannot trash, certain things that become impossible after that. And then this next stage, which continues the journey, is this journey into the heart of the mystery to, in a way, I use these words kind of lightly, I want ephemerally, if I can say that, to find out what you're here for. This idea that each one of us has a comes into this world with a unique gift. You use the words ecological niche. That's what it's pointing to. Yeah, so that's it. That's a little taste of why this work I find useful right now. And you can bring into it all of the other things. The rites of passage technology, the different modalities around dance and art. They all kind of come together.
And I wish that more people, what I would like is if people gave attention, like got hold of that concept of the wheel and spent even a quarter of an hour with it trying to nut it out, what it means, I think that could be transforming in itself. I think it's a remarkable tool, carries huge insights, and the deeper I get into there, the more human and wonderful I feel, and more comforted. Yeah.
Beautiful. And when you say the wheel, just so it's clear, we're talking about the map from Animas Valley and Bill Plotkin, the 8 ecocentric stages of life.
Yeah. I mean, even getting familiar with terms like ecocentric, for example, it does require learning a little bit of vocabulary, but it's well worth it for me.
Ecocentric as opposed to egocentric.
It's
a map. In its essence, the birthing of an ego, of a self, the birthing of a self, the journey of it establishing its identity, its functionality, its agency in this world, and then this critical moment that it enters into the cocoon, where it all, most people, that's the thing I get excited about. I'm not on about your stage anymore. I'm on about midlife. Most people think the midlife crisis is this, it's time for psychotherapy, and it's frightening, especially in our world, to be alone, going through what feels like a dissolution. But in terms of this thing, what it actually doing that dissolution, which is the focus of the West, is actually bringing you into right relationship with a mature psyche, whereby if you like, in the poetic language, your ego enters a marriage with your soul, and your soul is the one who has the vision and the clarity, and your ego becomes the means, the power behind it. But in normal language, it's maturing to see that life isn't necessarily about getting everything I want, but actually what feels. If I speak humbly and plainly, it's being in service to life, coming into right relationship. What can I give as opposed to what can I take?
Yeah, I want both.
Yeah, that's true.
As I grow older, I'm much more concerned about giving than taking. Yeah. It's not something I've had to work at. It's just happening.
And that's the thing, I think there's a lot of efforting happens in the first half of life. A lot of struggle, that's what I'm about.
A lot of acquisition.
Yeah, and even struggling against yourself, myself, me struggling to make sense of this, me struggling to be a kinder person, they're a huge amount of effort, and how much self-beating up I've done to myself to be a better person. And then just realizing now on 50 of what you're saying, as if the center of gravity is moving, and actually nature's coming on my side, and it's becoming a lot easier to choose kindness. I think this is the natural path of potential parenthood. What parenthood offers us a chance to put something else before ourselves. But for me, it's not been easy.
It's easy for me not to do so much because I'm much more tired than I used to be. So my body in one sense is leading me, or is congruent with what's happening in my head about letting go and travelling light, close listening, not striving anymore, or not so much, being with, noting, not planning, but being present.
Yeah, it's totally
those sorts of things.
Totally compelling to a younger human to feel those qualities that you.
Not 30 years ago, that wasn't me. 20 years ago, it wasn't me. It's me now.
There's one more thing to be said here. and that is, it's in the West. We've got these 4 journeys, and it's in the West. There's one more theme that's I think is important to seed. And I recently became aware of a quite a potent woman, Wahini, called Jean Houston. She's based in America. She's probably in her 80s now. And some of her work was, she talked about from pathos to mythos.
Oh, yeah.
And it was basically, you know, I just thought, it is powerful to me to think that we can rewrite our story, and where there's been so much pathos for me, so much suffering, personal suffering, that I took personally in a way and held myself accountable and berated myself without the compassion or without, but anyway, that we can turn that and that it could become mythos. In other words, here's the idea, said in the mythological stories, said by the poets, echoed again by Bill Plotkin, Jean Houston, and lots of others, and that is in the most wounded parts of us. You know, maybe if you're lucky, maybe we get to we have a friend who we can really share what's going on in a non-judgmental listening way. But this idea that in our wound, rather than it's something to get rid of or transform or change or fix, but actually right in that mess is your gold.
My Lois has a lovely idea of difficulties and hurts and regrets, etc. And what she's suggesting is, rather than try and expunge and get rid of those things or forget them or leave them behind, put your energy into bringing them into the boat with you so that they can accompany you, but without power. So it's all part of the journey, not to be fought against, but to be embraced and disempowered, or the learning extracted from them, but they don't have power anymore. And I love that. Good use of energy for a start, not to fight, but to yield and to journey on with.
I'll finish with, I want to finish with a line of poetry that David White gave to us in his epic poem, The Faces of Braga. And
the what?
The poem's called The Faces of Braga, and I'm not going to recite the whole poem, but there's this beautiful analogy of a carver working with wood. And I mean, I've tried to learn to work with wood, but he talks about how he uses the knot, uses the imperfection to go into the wood.
The K-N-O-T.
Yeah. So what others would say, oh, I'm not going to buy that piece of wood, it's got knots in. No, this is a different craft altogether. This is, he says something like, if only we knew, like the carver knew, how the flaws in the wood would lead his searching chisel to the core. We would smile too, and not need faces immobilized by the weight of things undone. If only we knew, like the carver knew, how the flaws in the wood would lead his searching chisel to the core. Thanks, Bill.
This has been a great
Make a beautiful life. Make a beautiful day. Make a beautiful moment. Give it away. Make a beautiful life. Make a beautiful day. Make a beautiful moment. And give it away.